Okay, so now we're going to talk about midpoint and slope. Particularly, what you're going to learn in this lesson is how to find the endpoints of a line given the midpoint and another point, or really a line segment, and how to find the slope of 2 points and determine if the two lines are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. Okay, so let's go ahead and try this out. It says if the midpoint of a line is 1, 1 and 4, 4 is one of the endpoints, what is the other endpoint of the line segment? So I am just going to draw a picture. Let me see something right quick. There we go. I'm just going to go through here and draw a picture. So, and it should say if the midpoint of a line is 1, 1. Okay, so let's go through here. And I'm just going to draw what they gave me. They said the middle of this line this time is 1, 1. And one of the endpoints is 4, 4. And you might have this in a row spot. It doesn't matter. We're just trying to draw a picture to think. What is the other endpoint? So if I'm trying to find this one, well, where do I put this point on the coordinate plane so that from the, and I'm going to call this A, B, and I'm just going to call them midpoint M. So where do I put A so that MA is the same distance as MB? Because that's the definition of a midpoint. It's the coordinate that splits the line into two equal pieces, or the line segment into two equal pieces. Well, I have a formula where we know the midpoint is calculated by x1 plus x2 divided by 2. Not y. And y1 plus y2 divided by 2. That's the formula that I have to get the x coordinate and the y coordinate. So I know that this is my x value for my midpoint and this is my y value for my midpoint. And here I'm going to go ahead and call this x2 and y2. And this point that I'm trying to find, we're going to call it x1 and y1. Okay? So I'm going to go through here and I'm going to get the x parts first. So I already know what my midpoint is. So to get my x portion, then I'm going to take my x coordinate of my midpoint. So I'm going to say the x values. Well, let me write it like this. So I'm going to say 1 equals, and my midpoint is 1, and my x1 I don't know, so I'm just going to write it as x1, plus my y2 is 4 over 2. So that's one equation that I'm doing to get the x value. Well, we said we don't like fractions. So in order to get rid of this denominator, I am going to multiply both sides by the number in the denominator. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 2 so I can get rid of that 2. So I'm going to say 2 equals x minus 1. I mean, not x minus 1, x1 plus 4. Or you can just call that x. Now we're going to solve this equation like we know to solve. The variables on the left and the constants are on the right. So I need the minus 2 from both sides. So I get 0 equals x plus 2. And then I need to get this variable on the other side. So minus x. So negative 1x equals 2. And I'm going to divide by negative 1, divide by negative 1. So we know our x1 has to equal negative 2. So that means the x value of this point has to be negative 2. Now we're going to go back and do the same for y. The y coordinate for the midpoint is 1. And I'll do that in blue. Is 1. So the midpoint for that is equal to the y1, we don't know. So I'm going to just put y1. The y2, so plus is 4 over 2. We do not like these fractions, so we're just going to multiply both sides by the denominator to get rid of that fraction. And we get 2 equals y1 plus 4. And we're going to solve this equation like we know. We get the constants on the left and the variables on the right. So I'm going to draw my little line. So I'm going to subtract 2, 0 equals y plus 2. Now this variable is on the wrong side, so I need to get it back on the right side. So I get negative y equals 2. And you can put 1 there if that confuses you. Now from there, I'm going to divide by negative 1. Divide by negative 1. Y equals negative 2. And then you go back up. So the y coordinate here has to be negative 2. And you're finished with that. Alright, so now the second question. It says, given the points 0, 5, 5, 2, 5, negative 2, and 0, negative 2, negative 2, and negative 3, determine if the two lines are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. So here, I have 2 points that make up a line. So I'm going to go ahead and I have another 2 points that make up a line. So if I want to know if these lines are parallel, perpendicular, or neither, I need to find the slope. This is what's going to help me determine this, the slope. And the symbol for slope is M. So I'm going to write this first point down and go ahead and find the slope of that line. So I'm going to find this was y1, x1, y1, x2, y2. Alright, so here my slope formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. That's rise over run. You've heard that before in middle school and in 9th grade. So here, remember when you substitute in, you put your numbers that you're substituting in parentheses so that when you have to go to your calculator, you are putting things in correctly. And the calculator won't make any errors. So M equals negative 2 minus 5 is going to be negative 7. And then 5 minus 0 is just 5. So that's the slope of the first line. Now we're going to go and find the slope of the second line. So I'm going to draw some separation here. So we get 0, negative 2. And then we get negative 2, negative 3. I'm going to call this x1, y1, x2, y2. So my slope equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So I'm going to substitute in. So we get negative 3 minus 2 over negative 2 minus 2. Okay, so now I'm going to go in here and do my math. So M equals negative 3 plus 2 is negative 1. And you can use your calculator to do what I'm doing. Negative 2 plus 2 is 0. So if I have 0 in the denominator, then what is that saying? That this slope is undefined. And it's also saying that I know these are not parallel because the slopes are not the same. So we know not parallel, slopes are different. So M's, that means slopes are different. We know they're not perpendicular. This is a symbol for perpendicular because slopes are not opposite signs and flip fractions. So therefore, the only answer we have left is that these lines are what we call neither lines. They're not parallel and they're not perpendicular. The slopes are not the same and they're not opposite. The signs are not opposites and the fractions are not flips or reciprocals of each other. So they're left with that these lines are neither. So that means they're not going to be parallel and they're not going to be perpendicular. Okay, so go ahead and finish the rest of these problems. Please, 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 I'm asking you to do your work so you can come tomorrow. And all we have to do is talk about where you struggled at or clear up and make sure your answers are correct. Okay, see you tomorrow.